Yesterday we began our discussion citing some of the references, the primary reference being Valmiki Ramayana, and acknowledging the fact that there are other expressions of Ramayana with different commentators and so forth, and some of the glories of hearing this description of the wonderful activities, pastimes of Lord Ramachandra, and of course that means his associates, and the places where he performed these activities become equally important and glorious. They're all of same absolute transcendental nature. So this morning we'll begin just covering a few topics, as you see from your schedule, but I wanted to spend some time now at the very beginning of our yatra describing what I'm going to call a backdrop, or the setting, the important themes that from time to time as we go along I'll point out again and point out again and point out again, but they're essential for getting a fuller and deeper appreciation of who is Lord Ramachandra and the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. Think of deity worship, and when you have a deity, you don't just place the deity on a table or something. There's an altar, and there's a backdrop behind the altar. It's part of, an essential, integral, you can't leave it out. You have to have a place where the deity is worshipped, and it's part of your worship. It's part of the whole experience of the worship of your deity. And you attend to it. You keep it clean and decorate it and keep it nice. From time to time changing the backdrop, at least the appearance and the mood. So similarly, the transcendental activities of Lord Ramachandra and the places where he performed those activities, there's some themes or essences that I'm going to point out some, so that as we go along, we'll have a more complete appreciation. The message will go more deeply. And you can hear some of these messages as we go along. So we'll start. You have to be able to see the screen over here. This is a map, and I can't use my laser pointer from where I am because I'm way over here. But towards the top, that's Ayodhya. And then going directly south, that's Chitrakoot. This is the path that Ram followed. And that green area shown is the Dandak forest. And Ram spent a number of years in each of these places. Nasik is the place where the encounter with the sister of Ravana, Shurparnaka, took place, and other things, where Sita was kidnapped, the encounter with Kara and Dushan, and so forth, and all the way down to Rameshwaram, and then crossing to Lanka, the battle with Ravana at Lanka. And then they just took the Pushpaka Vimana straight back, as the crow flies, as they say. Here's some beautiful images of some of the places that we'll either be visiting or we'll see. not necessarily we'll see from this angle of the cameraman, but Ayodhya, the place where Lord Ramachandra took birth and ruled for 11,000 years. The place of Sita's birth, we heard very briefly yesterday about that, while plowing the field for a yajna, Sita came out of the earth. This is Janak's palace in the kingdom of Janakapuri or Mithila. The place where Ahalya, the wife of Gautama, was relieved from a curse, and we'll hear about that. We won't go to this place, but one of the places certainly we'll go to is the river Sarayu. We'll hear the history of how the Sarayu became the Sarayu. And the place when Ram left Ayodhya, when he crossed the Ganga, the place where Guha had his capital, his main place in the forest. And when we go to Chitrakoot, we'll see this area, Ramkund, the place where Lord Ramachandra and Sita would take their bath on a daily basis for a long time, many, many years. So to appreciate this backdrop a bit, let's hear some messages about who is Lord Ramachandra. I'm going to call this the hierarchy. The hierarchy of the forms of Vishnu. There's a nice verse in Brahma Samhita which is referred to in places other than Brahma Samhita, the same metaphor, that Krishna is likened to a candle or a lamp from which other candles or lamps are lit, and two especially prominent amongst those expansions of Krishna are Rama and Nrsimha. Those of you that know the verse, we can recite the verse together. Deeparchir eva hidasham tadam abhyupetya Deepayateva vrita hetu samana dharma Yastadrig eva hicha vishnu taya vibhati Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. And the translation says the same. The light of one candle being communicated to other candles, although it burns separately in them, is the same in quality. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who exhibits himself equally in the same mobile manner in his various manifestations. So Krishna is the original candle, and from the original candle or flame, many other candles are lit, but he remains and maintains the position as the original Adi Purusham. And so many, another verse from Brahma Samhita, Ramadi Murtu Shukala Niyamena Tishtan Nanavataram Akarod Bhuvaneshu Kinto Krishna Swayam Samabhavak Paramak Pamanyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. This is an earlier verse in the sequence of Brahma Samhita verses, but it's speaking of the relationship, the Nana Avataram, various incarnations, Nana Avatar. They appear from Govinda, and Rama is mentioned in particular. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna, and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc., as his, and I put it in big letters, subjective portions, kind of mystical language of Bhaktisiddhanta. What's a subjective portion? Subjective portion. Well, portion we know, it's not the whole thing. It's, in the case of, we'll see, in the case of Rama and Nrsimha, pretty close to the full thing. But like we know from the teachings of Rupa Goswami, only Krishna has 4 particular qualities that the other forms of the Lord do not have. Krishna has, he's not a portion, he's in full. And the others are portions, subjective portions. It's Bhaktisiddhanta's language is kala, is a Sanskrit term. Kala is the kala of the original, subjective portion of the original. So from Laghu Bhagavatamrita, this is an image of Rupa Goswami, we're on the hierarchy of forms of Vishnu for the moment. He uses this particular terminology, Sad or Shad Aishvarya Purna Avatar. So Narayana has 6 opulences, Shad Aishvarya. Bhagavan has 6 opulences, and Krishna's Bhagavan in full, and Rama and Nrsimha are almost full. They're more full than any of the other forms of the Lord. Here's 2 references from Laghu Bhagavatamrita. Laghu Bhagavatamrita is a book written by Rupa Goswami. The subject matter of the book is the various forms of the Lord and what Scripture says about them. And he has a lot to say about Rama and Nrsimha. Here's one. There's a special position amongst all the avatars, other than Krishna, amongst all the avatars besides Krishna is the original, that's special about Rama and Nrsimha. And they're in this category of Shad Aishvarya Purna. Here's the reference where Rupa Goswami points to a verse from Padma Purana which says the 6 qualities are fully manifested in Nrsimha, Rama, and Krishna. They are considered paravashta, another Sanskrit term to learn. Paravashta. The relation between the other 2, Nrsimha and Rama, and Krishna is like lamps lit from the lamp of full 6 powers manifest in Krishna. So there are 4 qualities that Krishna exhibits that Rama and Nrsimha do not exhibit, but the Aishvarya are there in Purna, in full. And here's another reference, where in Laghu Bhagavatamrita, where this hierarchy of incarnations or avatars is described. And this is just quoting directly from the text of Laghu Bhagavatamrita. Some of the different varieties of avatars are Prabhava incarnations, Vaibhava, and some Paravashta or Shad Aishvarya Purna avatars. So he's going to go through, and this is in relation to the fullness of opulences, Aishvarya, Shad Aishvarya, in degrees of fullness. So it starts with Avesha. Some incarnations in the Avesha category are the four Kumaras, Narada and Prithu, whereas this Prabhava category, Mohini, Dhanvantari, Hangsha, Vyasa, Datta and Shukla are some of the Prabhava, so it's an increase of potency. The Vaibhava incarnations display a more superior potency than the Prabhava, and some of them are Matsya, Kurma, Naranarayana, Varaha, Hayashirsha, Prishnigarbha, Balabhadra, and Yagya. Now comes Rama and Nrsimha. Even more powerful are the Paravashta avatars, Nrsimha, Ramana, and Krishna, who each exhibit more power than the others. And then, of course, Krishna is the source of them all. The big ones and the medium ones and the small ones. He's the biggest because he's the source of them all. He has that unique position. Now, still on this point of hierarchy of the forms of Vishnu, here's an image many of you have seen. It's a wonderful poster, and it's depicting a number of things, but one of them is this verse, another verse from Brahma Samhita, very important text for Vaishnavas. Golokanamni nijadamni tale chatasya Devi Maheshu Haridama Surteshu Teshu Te Te Prabhava Vihitas Chayena Govindamade Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. And if you notice on the left column, Devi Dham, Mahesh Dham, Hari Dham, and Goloka Dham. So the verse starts with Goloka Dham is at the top. And Lord Brahma is the speaker, so Brahma is looking up from Devi Dham, which is where he is, the created realm. And above the created realm is Mahesh Dham. If you look closely, you'll see Lord Shiva and Uma. You'll see Mahavishnu there also, because he's lying in the causal ocean, which is outside each of the universes, and we have the bottom one of the universes. So Mahesh Dham is above the universe's platform, Devi Dham realm. And above Devi Dham is that middle section, the abode of Hari, or Vaikuntha Dham. And Vaikuntha Dham, look really closely, you'll see that rectangular shape that's there in the middle. There's this effulgent, glowing little orb towards the top. And I couldn't get a zoom in. You'll see in the next image. That's Ayodhya. So Ayodhya, the abode of Lord Ram, is within the realm of Haridham, but it's at the very top. It's at the very top of Haridham, and then comes Golokadham. Here's an image that shows the same. There's within the bottom, that circular depiction, that's Ayodhya. you'll see Sitaram, Lakshman, and Hanuman, Ayodhya Dham. And then there's regions of greater intimacy or greater madhurya. It increases. The measure of increase is, or you can say greatness or hierarchy of these forms and the abodes of the Lord have to do with the intimacy, the sweetness, the madhurya of the Lord in relation to others. So, Dwarka Dham, Mathura Dham, and Vrindavan Dham. We'll go the other way. Vrindavan Dham has the greatest of intimacy. And as Krishna performs his activities in Mathura Dham, it's of less intimacy. And in Dwarka Dham, it's more formality and more pomp and splendor and opulence per se, and the appearance of the relationships being more in those terms. And then in Ayodhya, it's more of the opulence and less than in Dwarka, the Madhurya. But going back down in comparison to Vaikuntha realm, there's much, 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 much more Madhurya. So within this Haridham realm, Ayodhya is situated, but it has a greater sweetness or madhurya, intimacy, like this beautiful painting of Sita and Ram and Lakshman in the forest. And you won't find that in Ayodhya. You won't find Lord Narayana being banned to go to the forest for 14 years and wear tree bark and sleep on the ground. It's Aishvarya all the way. But then in this intimacy, the exchanges between Lakshman and Ram and Sita and Ram, you don't find that in Vaikuntha, the nature of the loving exchange. So there's this very special feature about the Shad Aishvarya Purna Ram, who's exhibiting all the opulences in full of the Supreme Lord. But there's an intimacy that eclipses, not as fully as when the Supreme Lord appears as Lord Ram in Goloka, the most complete of which is Krishna in Vrindavan. So this is our scriptural-based understanding of the hierarchy. While on the one hand, they're the same. They're all Vishnu Tattva. They're in the same category. There's degrees. There's a hierarchy amongst them. And we're hearing, while taking part in this yatra, we're hearing about one who is amongst all the forms of the Lord in Vaikuntha, most intimate, in comparison between Rama and Nrsimha, of these other two. The sweetness of the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra excel. There's a sweetness in the pastimes with Lord Nrsimhadev and Prahlad, just by placing his hand on Prahlad's head. Prahlad says, this is a kind of exchange that even the goddess of fortune hasn't experienced. There's no one else besides you who have done this kindness to me, and so forth. But even more so in Ayodhya, in the pastimes of Ram. And so what we'll hear as we go on, I'm doing this not to have a competition between who's greater, who's in the hierarchy position greater than another. It's so that as we go on hearing, there's impetuses, udipan, there's stimulations for ecstatic love towards Ram. By hearing, the purpose is, in speaking in this way, is so that your love for Ram will be stimulated. And as your love for Ram or the Supreme Lord becomes stimulated, wonderful things happen. All the illusion of Maya fades. The importance, like I was mentioning yesterday, when Lava and Kusha were narrating Ramayana, Brahma said, persons will simply forget their material existence. They'll be lifted to a condition of sweetness and bliss and transcendental joy that their whole being will become covered with that experience, lifted out of the darkness of material existence. And as envy towards the Supreme becomes attraction and love for the Supreme, material existence fades away. It's the Bhagavad Dharma method, and very wonderful message indeed. So bear in mind this particular glory of and position of Lord Ramachandra amongst all the forms of the Lord. Another is, I'm going to call this non-fiction, because we'll hear opulences of the Lord and personalities who lived during a different yuga than we live, where in this Kali Yuga everything becomes diminished, and we hear something that's not diminished and we think, oh, how is that possible? It's fiction. It's poetic imagination. It couldn't be like that. You know, the mind, our dear friend, just distorts or minimizes or places the reality that is being disclosed to us, and somehow it doesn't go in. So be alert, because we'll be hearing things that are super fantastic, but they're not imaginary. It's not mythology or fancy or poetic imagination. Valmiki was a good writer, like that lady that wrote Harry Potter story. Fantastic imagination, and she took you there, and there you are with Harry Potter and all the personalities with Harry Potter. Total fiction. But she was a great writer. Obviously, she sold a lot of books and hit, certain chords with the reader. But this isn't like that. This is not fiction. It's fantastic, but it's not fiction. Valmiki was given a benediction by Lord Brahma, but on behalf of the personality of Godhead himself, to have Valmiki not only know what happened and what was said, but to be present as it was happening, even it was in another period of time. But he was being given the power to be there and not only see and hear everything, but get inside the hearts of all the personalities being described and feel their feelings and their mood and their emotion in such detail, and have the power to depict it in sound vibration and sing it in perfect poetic meter. Such an amazing composition. And to transmit that to Lava and Kusha, who, when narrating it to the various audiences that they moved here and there and narrated and sang it with musical accompaniment, it was an experience. People experienced, they felt, they were there, experiencing Ram's Leela. Better than video recording. We have the opportunity, because of technology, to see videos of Srila Prabhupada. Those of you that weren't in his physical presence, You can see, because of technology, film, now digitalized, Prabhupada speaking, Prabhupada walking, Prabhupada interacting, room conversations. Imagine if you had that of Bhaktisiddhanta or the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan as they were experiencing what they were experiencing, and Raghunath Das Goswami excavating Radhakund, and have a documentary about this is even better. He experienced the feelings, not knew what they were feeling, kind of mental telepathy. He experienced their feelings. So Valmiki Ramayana stands above all other descriptions. It's the monarch, the king amongst all of the depictions of Ram's pastimes. Others are also authorized, but very, very special. This the feature of Leela itself. Leela means, we translate it as pastime, and the purpose of pastimes is to draw the heart to the Supreme Lord. Now with Ram's Leela in particular, he's displaying other things, like Dharma, because he's the emblem of the ideal king. Each of the forms of the Lord have some specific function or purpose or feature. Ram is the ideal king. So to be the ideal king, he appears human-like. He's not human, but he appears human-like, and the narration weaves back and forth between the worldly Dharma emblem carrier or role model for the world, the ideal disciple. This is Leela. Just like Krishna had a spiritual master. We don't find Narayana going to Gurukul and being trained by his spiritual master to become Narayana. But this is a Vaikuntha personality, Ram and Lakshman, who accept the instructions of Vishvamitra Muni. So Vishvamitra Muni has a very special role to play. There's a whole day dedicated to Vishvamitra Muni, because he's a very important player or person in the cast of Ram's Leela, showing, in one sense, how one can go from being a non-devotee to a perfected devotee in different steps and stages. But he has another function, and it's the function of Guru. His function is human-like. He's teaching Ram various mantras, so that Ram can not become hungry and not become tired or fatigued, and always be victorious in whatever he tries to do. And he gives him mantras to release various weapons, 100 different weapons. We'll hear the detail, Vishvamitra Muni detail, so that Ram can perform his pastime of killing Ravana. Now Ram doesn't need anything. He doesn't need a guru, but he's teaching the world we need a guru. So Vishvamitra is one of those gurus, a very prominent one indeed. And they're performing their role of instructing us how to have proper regard for guru. Even he gives mission impossible. The answer is yes. Because my father instructed me to carry out whatever you say without question? So the answer is yes. And performing at the end of the day's journey, massaging the legs and feet of Vishwamitra Muni, while Vishwamitra Muni is giving further instructions about things that we'll hear, the history of the Ganges and the history of Sarayu and the history of various ashrams, and in detail and detail and detail, because that's Valmiki Ramayana. It's so much detail about the personality of Godhead and things that he learns from Vishwamitra Muni. Or the departure of Ram from Ayodhya, very much not the same, but very much resembling Krishna's departure from Vrindavan, taken by the chariot of Akrura. And here it's Sumitra at the head of the chariot, and behind the chariot there you see Dasaratha, and you see the three principal queens of Dasaratha, and the mood of the residents of Ayodhya not wanting Ram to leave. This is Leela. It's a theme of meeting and separation as you hear. Listen with that ear. It's churning the emotion, attaching you to Ram, and then the expectation of meeting with Ram, and the expectation of Ram's departure, and then again the expectation of meeting with Ram, and then the meeting with Ram, and then the departure from Ram. And it's emotion churning as you become more and more attached to Ram. So as you hear Ramayana again and again, Prabhupada said this, that when he was a young boy, there was no such thing as a public function, we'll say it positively. Every public function, wherever it was, there was always some aspect of Ramayana or Mahabharata recitation. It's just part of the culture to become attached to Ram, to become attached to Krishna. And the feelings that come with those narrations because of that attachment. And because of that attachment, then the whole character of society becomes lifted. The theistic feature of the population becomes lifted by this quality of hearing Ramayana. So some of you, you've lived with this your whole life. So it's just part of your life, and it's just say it again and say it again and say it again. It's part of your life, and for some of us it's a whole new set of names, and who's this one and who's that one. And so I'm mentioning another feature. The various names, it's nice, but it's not the essence. And as you hear again and hear again and hear again, then the names start to take on meaning. Like, okay, there's Ram, and then his other brother is Lakshman, and who are the other two? Oh yeah, Shatrughna, and what's the other one? Bharata. Oh yeah, okay. This one, that one. Okay, four. Okay, and you hear it again and again, and their personalities start to emerge. You hear it again and again, and the ministers of Dasaratha start to emerge, principal the Sumitra. But then there's Vamadev, and then there's the other 7 of the ministers, and you hear them again and again and hear them again and again, and the picture starts to become full. And it's part of the attachment to Ram, because he's displaying the character of an ideal king. So listen more to the character, and don't be confused or frustrated or befuddled about the names of all the personalities. I'm saying this particularly for people to whom Ramayana is new. Because there's millions of lessons of practical matters of life. And the practical matters of life, the most important thing that matters is attachment to the Supreme Lord. And then there's other things that matter. That's, duties. And how do you decide what to do and not to do? Well, there's these, so this is another theme, and I'll illustrate it. There's the sense of duty, and there's the sense of love. Prabhupada said, they're not on the same platform. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, they're not on the same platform. They're both part of the life of a devotee. And the essence of a devotee is to become attached to the Supreme Lord. So there's this feature of what we're going to hear that's more on the head side. Duty. What is right and what is wrong? What is to be done, what is not to be done? And there's ample illustration of that. But there is also the heart side, where decisions are made, actions are taken because of the strong condition of heart. And there's many, 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 but one of the outstanding ones I'll just mention. Maybe a couple of them. One of them is, we don't hear so much, but I think it's very instructive and very wonderful, about the wives of the other. We hear about Sita and Ram, but then there's Lakshman. And Lakshman was married too. We don't hear so much about his wife. Urmila was the younger sister of Sita, and they were married together at the same time, the same marriage. In fact, all four of the brothers were married at the same time, the same marriage. So Urmila, when it comes time for Ram to leave, to go into exile for 14 years, he has to deal with Lakshmana, who doesn't want him to leave. And when he understands that Ram is going to leave, I want to go with you, and he doesn't want him to go with him, but he persuades Ram to let him go with him. Then Lakshman has to go back and talk to his queen, Urmila. Now we hear the glorious response of Sita, the wife must accompany her husband in good fortune, ill fortune. That's the role of a wife. Don't tell me otherwise. It's not dharmic. She chastises him. If my father was here, my father would say, what kind of person is this? You've married a woman in the dress of a man. She was insulting her husband. I'm going with you. Don't give me this non-dharma thing. I'm going to go with you. Please sit down. Whoever's children are running around like this, please stop it. So, Lakshman goes to Urmila. It's a very beautiful scene. You'll hear it again. I like it very much. So I'll say it quickly. She's in the midst of painting a painting of the coronation of Ram. One of her gifts, one of her talents is painting. It's from the heart. She's expressing her heart in the form of painting. And she loves, like everyone in Ayodhya, Ram as the king. So she's so happy when the news has come that Ram will become king, so he makes a painting of Ram's coronation. And she's almost completed with the painting. She hears some noise, is suddenly startled, and a whole bunch of paint goes splashing onto the canvas, and the painting is ruined. So imagine what she's feeling. Terrible. Just at that time, Lakshman comes. And she shows what just happened, and this ill fortune, the painting got ruined. He says, not just the painting is ruined, the whole thing is ruined. Ram is going to the forest for 14 years, and I'm going with him. Now, she could have said what Sita said, speaking on the side of duty as well as the side of heart. But her husband has a mood. And the mood of her husband is dedicated service to Ram. So she reasons, although I want to go with you too, if I was going with you, you'd be distracted from your service to Ram in the forest. It'll be difficult for you to do what you're going to have to do because of having me around. You have to pay attention to me, so I'll stay here. Balancing the head and the heart. I mean, Valmiki doesn't use those terms. I'm using those terms. But there's many such experiences. Another one that's very emotion churning is when Sumitra, who you see is the chariot driver and principal minister of Lord Ramachandra, I'm going to have to hurry up. I'm having too much fun, I'm getting distracted. Sumitra deposits Ram deep into the forest and comes back with an empty chariot. And he comes to report everything to Dasaratha. And Dasaratha's with Kaushalya and a number of others in his chamber, or her chamber. And when Dasaratha directly asks, say what were Ram's last words when you departed. Describe the whole situation. And he obeys because he's the chief minister and dear friend of Dasaratha. And when that hits the heart of Kaushalya, she breaks down. One can only imagine. Now, this is transcendental emotion, but human-like kind of emotion, where she starts berating and smashing Dasaratha for what he has done. And Dasaratha moans and cries and says, please be kind upon me. I'm the victim of circumstance. I had to uphold my word. It's the duty. It's the duty of a king to uphold his word. What could I do? And then her heart and her head change. And she falls at Dasaratha's feet and begs forgiveness. I should never have spoken this way. What kind of a wife and what kind of a queen, what kind of a person would essentially beat a person when they're down, and I beat you again and again. How horrible, please forgive me. She's moved between her affection for her son and her affection for her husband, the duty of a queen and the duty of a mother, and it's very difficult. And these are not people like us. These are perfected beings. But they're displaying the characteristics that look human-like, but they're giving us inspiration and guidance. Where ultimately should our attachment go? The head has to be guided by the heart, and the heart has to be guided by the head. We have to act within the codes of Dharma. So Ramayana is filled with this kind of balance. And this meeting and separation message. In the Leela, the surrender of Vibhishan, we heard about this. This is now just still under the topic of the role of Leela within what we're going to be hearing. The attachment to the personality of Godhead is the ultimate aspect, but Vibhishan is a highly elevated soul. So he knows when he comes before Ram, he doesn't just come before Ram. He's hovering in the air. He has this power to do so. And with his 4 ministers behind him. He's awaiting Ram's willingness to accept. So it's a whole series of instructions, as we heard yesterday. Vedanta Deshika particularly favored expounding on this Sharanagati, the function of taking shelter of the Supreme Lord, and how it is done, and how the Lord feels, and how the devotee feels, and so forth. There's instruction in Dharma, and there's instruction also in the attachment to the Supreme Lord, the ultimate fulfillment. And then, of course, the destruction of Ravan. Now, the destruction of Ravan, step back, at least in this case, this is Jai, the gatekeeper. You know, we came in the door, there was Jai and Vijay. Did you see them? Making sure that you paid your registration fee and you're allowed to come in and take prasadam. And so Jai became Hiranyakashipu, and then in his next life he became Ravana. And he did so for the purpose of reciprocating a service to the Supreme Lord, who enjoys the chivalry exhibited in this painting. And along with him, the Vanaras, and we'll hear some more about how the Vanaras had these are demigods who produced children under the instruction of Brahma to do so, in such a way they would not violate the vow that Brahma gave, promise, benediction that Brahma gave to Ravan, but then they could also participate and show another glory of Lord Ramachandra, that he accepts service from anyone regardless of their position, socio-economic, birth, language, culture, caste, color, creed, anyone. Monkeys and bears and squirrels and you name it. Everyone's eligible. Just have devotion to Ram. So there are these lessons throughout the whole of our time together. Listen, see the deity on the altar with his backdrop. These are lessons that are part of what's being passed on to us. Lessons of life. Lessons that we can guide our life by. Now we're going to touch upon this more later because I've already spoken too much. But we have to be careful when we apply these lessons under the guidance of a knowledgeable Vaishnava guide in our spiritual lives, because this is a different yuga. And the emphasis during that different yuga is different because of it's a different yuga. Their principles are quite similar, and how to apply those principles, we need some discrimination, which means we need some proper guidance, how to apply these principles in our lives. But listen, you'll hear and also be careful in applying the principles in the proper way, suited for our lives. So we have, therefore, the life of our founder Acharya becomes all the more important in understanding the rules, the codes of Dharma that Ram observed, and how to apply them in our lives per the instruction of our founder Acharya. So I'll expand on this later because of the time limitation. So now we're ready for this morning's class. We have a lot of material to cover. I think I'm going to go over time. People in the kitchen should know that's going to go over time. There's a very nice verse in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 3. This says the same thing it says in many other places of the Bhagavatam, but the Lord is not material. Here's the verse, as we hear about Lord Ramachandra. Na vidyate yasya cha karma, janma karma va, na nama rupe gunadosha eva va, tatapi lokapyaya sambhavaya yat, swamaya tan yanukalam richati. So yasya it refers to the Supreme Lord. Na vidyate yasya, we should know that he doesn't have worldly birth, janma, worldly karma, worldly name or form. Just like take any name, looking at a camera, the camera's looking at me. So there's a name, but you have the object and then the object gets a name, or here's a chair. And then there's the chair, so it has now a name, and maybe some adjectives that go with the name. A white chair, a stuffed white chair, something, something, something. So, but it's temporary. But the name and the form and the activities and everything in relation to Ram, they're eternal. That was this glorification that Brahma gave about Ramayana. This will be heard and sung for as long as existence. And it goes even beyond existence. After existence ceases, it won't cease. So these activities of Ram, all the narrations that we'll be hearing, they have very special potencies unlike anything material, just through sound vibration. Then in another place, in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, Prabhupada makes reference, we heard it yesterday in relation to same idea from Chaitanya Charitamrita. But here's, I'll just read Prabhupada's purport 519.2. The Vishnu Dharmottara describes that Lord Ramachandra and his brothers, Lakshman, Bharat and Shatrughna, are incarnations of Vasudeva Pradyumna, Vasudeva Sankarshana Pradyumna and Aniruddha, respectively. However, the Padma Purana says differently. The Padma Purana says that Ramachandra is Narayana and his 3 brothers are, respectively, Shesha and his chakra and his conch, Shankha. So those are 2 different descriptions. Baladev Vidyabhusan solves the problem. It says this over there and says that over there. Which one's right? Which one's wrong? They're both right. Huh? Tadidam kalpa bede naiva sambhavyam. There it is. I underlined this word kalpa. Kalpa is sometimes called a day of Brahma. Sometimes Prabhupada uses millennium. That's not just, there's many millenniums within a day of Brahma. Millennium means a yuga cycle. So there are different yuga cycles or different millenniums or different days of Brahma, and these differences are because of that. That's what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. Tadidam kalpa bede naiva sambhavyam. One example directly found in the Bhagavatam is Lord Varaha and Lord Varaha is being described by Maitreya to Vidura, and in that description, he describes the two different Sveta Varaha and Rakta Varaha as if they're one. And in Prabhupada's purport he writes, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Vedic literatures describe the incarnation of Lord Varaha in two different devastations, namely Chakshusha devastation and the Swayambhuva devastation. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur suggests that the sage Maitreya amalgamated both the four incarnations in different devastations and summarized them in his description to Vidura. So there's a certain liberty that Maitreya is taking, and there may be a certain preference for different reasons from different authorized sources of Ram's Leela. And in this particular case with Varaha, he amalgamates them into one, and so we've done a little bit of that too. There's some references, I'll make an attempt to point out, some references are from Valmiki and some references are from the others, Adhyatma Ramayana. But we're all ultimately addressing ourselves to Lord Ramachandra, the personality of Godhead. So in the Valmiki Ramayana, it begins with Lava and Kusha narrating Ramayana to the residents of Ayodhya. Because after being instructed, taught and trained carefully by Valmiki, they went out, and in different places they were narrating and singing Ramayana. And in one particular occasion, Bharata heard one of those narrations, and he was so enlivened, he went back and told Ram, we have to bring them here. At that time it wasn't known that they were the sons of Ram, they're just two illustrious sages. And when Ram saw them, he said, they have markings like Kshatriyas, but they have a spirit like Brahmanas, most illustrious sages. And so they're reciting the Ramayana in the court of Ram. Ram, because he's the king, this is now after he's come back, so many years after he's come back, because now Lava and Kusha are young men. So he's seated on his throne, and he wants to hear, and he's so attracted that he wants to sit in the audience. This is the heart. He wants to sit in the audience with everybody else. But everybody else isn't going to feel comfortable if he's sitting with them. And so he waits till they get absorbed in Valmiki Ramayana, and then he quietly sneaks down from the high seat and sits with everybody else. And they don't even notice, because they're more attracted to the Ramayana than to him. And as different scenes happen, people laugh and people, nudge one another, and Ram does that with somebody. And somebody, without even looking at him, they nudge him back and pat him on the back. And then when the narration is over, they look to the throne and he's not there. This is the heart. They're so thrilled and absorbed and enthralled in the narration. Their hearts are fully attracted. They're not missing the physical presence because they're in his presence through the narration. Very important lesson about us, that we wish to be in the presence of Krishna or someone who is loved by us very much, a spiritual personality loved by us very much. The sound vibration, hearing and chanting process is our process. So, Love and Kush are narrating. And one of the first things that they narrate about is Ayodhya, the place where Dasaratha ruled. The description of their narration goes, they say, we too will recite from the beginning in its entirety, omitting nothing, this whole beautiful description. And the beautiful description is a description of the descendants of Lord Brahma, the Lord of all creatures, and those to whom this whole earth first belonged. Among them was Sagara. Just a little sound bite, it's just the detail comes later. But Sagara, who caused the ocean to be dug and had 60,000 sons to form his entourage when he went abroad. So we're going to narrate this in full, and one has to hear with great attention and with great faith, and without anusuyataha, without envy, without unnecessary objection. So it's okay, just like in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna wants to know, you said this, but then you said that, could you explain? So seeking clarification is one thing, and unnecessary objection or faithlessness, enviousness of the Supreme Lord is another thing. So it's indicating that the mood and manner for proper oral reception. So now they describe Ayodhya. And Ayodhya has its history. It was first constructed by Vaivasvata Manu. Now Vaivasvata Manu rules all of mankind, but he personally created it, designed it, built it, constructed it. Later, of course, other kings developed it. But then he entrusted that capital city, Ayodhya, to Ikshvaku. And Ikshvaku was the first ruler. And in the line of Ikshvaku, it was continued generation after generation to the present time when Dasaratha was ruling. This kingdom, the capital was Ayodhya, but the kingdom was the kingdom of Koshala. And the description of the kingdom of Koshala is as you saw on the map. It goes all the way from Tibet to the Godavari in South India. It was a huge kingdom. Now, India today doesn't go all the way to Tibet, but it's in effect a tract of land that was the whole of India. And of course, that was his kingdom, and his kingdom, he was the ruler of the world. He was the ruler of the world. Now, this is describing the capital, Ayodhya. Ayodhya was really big. The measure is given in yojanas, and 1 yojana equals different multipliers, but commonly it's 8 miles. So most of you are, I think, accustomed to kilometers. I don't know how to transfer to kilometers. But the diameter was 96 miles. So think of some city where you reside. Somebody resides in Hyderabad, and somebody resides in Indore, and somebody resides in Beijing, and somebody resides in St. Louis, and 96 miles and 12 miles tall. That was it. It wasn't like just a circular place. 96 by 12 miles. with highly prosperous on the bank of the Sarayu River, rich of wealth and grain, well-ordered avenues. Careful city planning was done by Manu to build the city. The roadways were always sprinkled with flower petals and scented water, a little different than the streets of India today. Although the people here keep this place pretty clean. There were gateways and arches, the marketplaces. It was an abundant place for trade and commerce, people of all different activities, but their well-ordered presentations and interiors. Every implement and every weapon, every artisan, there were musicians and dancers constantly engaging in their activities. It was like a festival every day in Ayodhya. And then there was the king, Dasaratha, the king of Ayodhya, who was a perfect king. He was well versed in the Vedas, and he gathered around him many resources of scholars and military and wealth and things that kings need in order to run a kingdom. He was vastly powerful. In fact, his name, Dasaratha, was given because when he had a different name before, but it was this name stuck. When he was fighting on the battlefield, it was as if there were 10 Dasarathas and 10 chariots fighting in all directions. I mean, not just 2 directions or 4 directions or 8 directions, 10 directions. 10 directions. You couldn't see, where's Dasaratha? 10 chariots at once. Powerful, so powerful that he was invited by the demigods to assist them when they had some difficulty. Very powerful warrior. Very righteous, guided by righteousness, very deep in his understanding of the scriptures, always surrounding himself. One of his greatest opulences was his ministers. There's a whole section that I'm not going to have time to go into. Just like there's 4 brothers, there's 8 ministers. And Sumantra was the chief minister who everyone looked up to. And then the 7 ministers each had a particular role and function. And they all worked together and they guided the kingdom. So Dasaratha didn't have to be running around. He had this infrastructure of ministers that took care of everything. And they were all expert. The name Ayodhya means unconquerable. So it had military arrangements so that no forces could possibly penetrate and come in and cause disturbance for the citizens of Ayodhya, this 96 by 12 miles place. Powerful. And their power wasn't just because they had big arms and did weightlifting. They were highly disciplined and they had capacity to control their mind and senses. They knew all types of military skill, but they only used it judiciously, according to the codes of Dharma, because that's how they were trained, that's how they received their position as military people. There's mention in passing, and then it's described later, that they even knew the art of using weapons that were guided by sound, sonic weapons, Now, modern times, they're developing sonic weaponry too. I've learned a little bit about it. But this was different. They would hear a sound, and based on the sound, they could release a weapon, and the weapon would go to where the sound was. I mean, this happened, like, for example, in the battle with Tataka. She would sometimes become invisible and then screech, but you couldn't see where she was. But the sound was coming from someplace, and the weapon could be fired to hit where the sound came from, sonic weaponry, that kind. But they didn't practice it, and there's a reason why they didn't practice it. It had to do with an incident when Dasaratha was a young man. When he was a young man, Kshatriya, he was introduced to sonic weaponry. And he wanted to try it out. Like Kunti wanted to try out this mantra that she had from Durvasa Muni. So he went out into the forest and he heard a sound that to him, near the river Sarayu, that sounded like an elephant or some animal taking water from the river. So he released an arrow and it hit its target, following where that sound was coming from. And it went into the heart, into the body of a young Brahmin named Shravan Kumar. And Dasaratha, as a young man, then heard a human voice, not an elephant voice, wailing and crying and calling out in pain. So Dasaratha, his heart dropped. And he ran quickly to the scene and saw this young Brahmin with some pitchers of water, with an arrow, his arrow, stuck in his body. Now I have to be conscious of time. So the story can be narrated in great, great, great detail, but this young man asked, "Why did you shoot me? I'm a Brahmin. You're the killer of a Brahmin. Why did you do this sinful act?" And Dasaratha was smashed. "I was trying my sonic weaponry and I thought you were an elephant and I couldn't see the target and so I released the weapon." And Shravan said, "I'm the only son of a blind, aged Brahmana couple, and they're waiting for me to bring this water to them. Because without me, they can't even exist because they're blind and old. So I have two requests. This arrow in my chest is too painful. Pull it out. And by pulling it out, I'll die. Blood will come gushing from the wound. The pain is too much. Pull out the arrow." And the other is, "Take these pitchers of water to my aged parents. You follow the path and up and up and up, and you'll find them. And deliver the water." So the king, or prince, Dasaratha at the time, drew the arrow. The Shravan Kumar died right before his eyes. Then he took the pitchers of water and heard, as the blind parents heard the sound, they thought it was their son. "Why have you taken so long? We're very thirsty. Please bring the water at once." Soft voice, elderly voice. Dasaratha placed the pitchers in front of them and said, "I'm not your son. I am Dasaratha from the Ikshvaku dynasty, and I have some terrible news to convey. Your son is dead. With my sonic weaponry, I killed him," and told the whole story. And they then said, The husband said, because of this sin of killing a Brahmana, your sinful reaction would have been so much greater had you not come to us and confessed the sin and come to take care of us. But we're blind. We can't live without our son. Please take us to where he is. We can perform the funeral ablutions, and perform his funeral pyre. We want to enter into his funeral pyre because we can't live without our son. And then this curse was uttered that you will also have to die feeling pain of separation from your son. Now at this time he didn't even have a son. But so the curse of the Brahmana didn't go in vain. Later Dasaratha came to understand, by remembering this incident, why he had to die the way that he was dying, because of the curse of the Brahmana, because the sin of killing that son, their son, in the way that he did. So details and details and details of Lava and Kusha's description of the glorious city of Ayodhya, powerful, loved by all the citizens, because Dasaratha cared for his citizens like his own children, and those who were cared for him felt more affection for him than they did for their parents, not just because they got more, but the affection of Dasaratha was like that, because he was a pure devotee of the Lord, and he was caring for others as only a pure devotee of the Lord can care for others. It said in the marketplace there weren't any locksmiths. Nobody had locks, because everyone had what they needed. So it's not a successful occupation in Ayodhya to sell locks. He had physical strength, his prowess already mentioned. He had intellectual strength, which came from his study of the scripture and carefully applying the message of the scripture in his life. He had emotional strength, mentioned because although he was the ruler, he had great feelings and compassion for all those that were his subjects under his rule. And he was very generous and sensitive to the needs of those he ruled. One of the 8 ministers was specifically, that was his specialty. He was available and very effective at hearing, not always necessarily giving to the persons he heard from what they felt they wanted and needed, but they felt heard. And it was administered to in a proper way, not necessarily the way that they felt, but they had love for Dasaratha in that way also. Not that he was the only one in the kingdom that had that capacity. And he has spiritual strength. And the spiritual strength, because it's going to come up, I know it's going to come up in the questions and answers as soon as I stop talking and we go along. How do you balance these things? It requires spiritual strength. When there's challenges in life, it requires spiritual strength. Where do you get the spiritual strength? So we get our spiritual strength in part from chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and calling to Balaram to give us the needed strength to carry out our service. Oh Rama, please give me the strength to carry out my service unto Krishna. In Ramayana it's mentioned specifically, he always had a clear picture of the ultimate goal of his life. Pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That therefore he was the proper king, being spiritually qualified in that way. And seeking mercy from that source, the goal of his life. Not just, there's the effort and there's the mercy aspect of spiritual strength. Very important. Nice topic. All of these topics are like this other commentator just took a topic and then developed a whole essay on the topic, and we don't have time. But it's an essence message. He had all these capacities of a qualified king. Within Ayodhya, there was a system of harvesting rainwater, because at the time there was a rainy season. And when the rainy season was abundant, water would be gathered and water would be stored in a certain manner so that it would be available not only for the rest of the year, but even in other years when there was less rain than a particular year. Ayodhya had that function. But during the 60,000 years of Dasaratha's rule, there was a period of time for 10 years, there was no rain. And in the 11th year, it started, the supply of harvested rainwater ran out and people were in great difficulty. No crops, no rain, no crops, nothing to eat, very difficult. So Dasaratha consulted his excellent astrologer and asked, why is this? And the astrologer told him that Shani, or Saturn, was glaring in a certain way over Ayodhya so that there was no rain. So what did Dasaratha do? He got on his chariot and went to confront, in a pretty mystical chariot. He could travel wherever he wanted to go. He went and confronted Saturn. Saturn saw him coming and he glared at him, and Dasaratha started falling and falling and falling and falling and falling, including his whole chariot. This is all described in Padma Purana. As the chariot was falling, Jatayu, huge bird, saw Dasaratha and his chariot and horses falling, and he caught him, spread his giant, just one of his wings was enough to hold him. So Dasaratha didn't die. And Jatayu got fired up and said, let's go back and confront him. So he went back again, and Saturn thought, wow, I like his determination. So I'll turn my glance a different direction. No battle took place. Rain started again coming to Ayodhya and everything was nice. So Jatayu was then given a benediction by Dasaratha. What would you like? Anything you would like that's within my power to give you. And the answer that was given, is Jatayu would like, when Dasaratha has a son, that his son could become Jatayu's son. Now at this time, Jatayu had no son. Dasaratha had no son. So Dasaratha said yes. So later, Jatayu takes care of Ram when Ram is in the forest, like a father takes care of his son. And when Sita was kidnapped, Jatayu protected Sita like a father will protect his daughter. But there was a problem. Even in Ayodhya, not just, New York City or Chicago or Hyderabad or Indore or Beijing or wherever you're from, even in Ayodhya there was a problem. What's that? Dasaratha was for 60,000 years unable to bear a son. Now, he had many co-wives. We hear that there's 3 principal wives. The eldest and first was Kaushalya. Kaushalya had a daughter. We'll hear about her daughter, Shanta. Shanta was a daughter that was given to a friend of Dasaratha who had no children and wished to have a daughter. She became an adopted daughter of King Romapada, dear friend of Dasaratha, but no son. Now when Ravana was touring here and there to kill everybody, Parashuram was touring to kill. He wouldn't touch anybody when they were in the middle of a wedding. So every time when he was coming in the direction, 350 times he came to Ayodhya to kill or just chase away Dasaratha, it was time to have a marriage. 350 times. So he had 353 wives. But the 3 principal, Kaushalya and Sumitra, and the youngest was Kaikeyi, no sons. So he was very, very concerned. And in the course of that concern, he shared with his ministers, as part of my essential part of my duty, I've carried out all my duties and I'm very dutiful, but there's no son. So I'd like to suggest that my ministers and brahmanas in the kingdom, arrange for an Ashvamedha Yajna whereby I may have a son. Because this Ashvamedha Yajna specifically is to permit the person to become free from sin, because if one becomes free from sin, that may take away the obstacle of no children. So the ministers came forward, particularly Vashishta said, very, very good. Let us commence the arrangements. Sumitra, the chief of his ministers, privately requested a discussion with Dasaratha and explained a very elaborate story of something that he had heard, a Puranic narration given by Sanat Kumar in a previous yuga, Satya Yuga. So this is Sumitra speaking to Dasaratha saying, long, long ago, the great sage Kashyapa, who was one of the direct sons of Lord Brahma, and the Prajapati had the capacity to produce offspring directly from his mind. So one day when Kashyapa was meditating upon the sun, in his mind came the idea of a personality, and boop, the personality manifested, named Vibhandaka. Vibhandaka was born from the mind of Kashyapa, who was born from the mind of Brahma. And as soon as he was born, Vibhandaka went to the forest, somewhere in Madhya Pradesh, a place called Chambal Valley. And Vibhandaka was performing very extreme austerities. And this news of the extreme austerities of Vibhandaka, somebody sent Indra a text message. And he checked his cell phone and said, oh, Look at this text message. He heard that Vibhandaka was performing this ugra tapasya, very severe austerity in Chambal Valley. So he sent one of his ministers to go find out what was that austerity, what was all this about. The minister came back and reported, very severe austerity. Such a severe austerity has become so powerful that if he becomes angry, he could incinerate the whole universe. If he wanted anything he wants, he's become so powerful. So Indra got a little nervous, like he sometimes does. Uh-oh, maybe he's thinking he'll become so powerful, he'll take over my position as Indra. Then the minister said, you can't check him, it's too powerful. But there's one suggestion. You get a very, very qualified female to go and attract his attention, and maybe he'll get distracted. He thought that was a good idea, but he couldn't find anyone qualified in the heavenly kingdom, so he went to Lord Brahma and Brahmaloka and told Lord Brahma his problema. And said, you have a lady from this realm that's highly austere and highly qualified. And so Brahma agreed. Her name was Harsha because she was always smiling. So Harsha agreed, but said, I don't, with my qualification, I can understand. Vibhandaka doesn't have any material attraction at all. There's no way that by my features I can attract him. But there is one way, by demonstrating and displaying spiritual quality, by chanting of mantras and those types of things. I can try, but it's risking my life. If he becomes angry, he could just burn me to ashes and it's over. But Brahma has asked me, I'm at your service, I'll go. So she went. And when she arrived at Chambal Valley, Kashyapa was just finishing taking his morning bath. So she sat on the path that he would travel back to his ashram and was chanting mantras very expertly because she's from Brahmaloka. And hearing the chanting of mantras, which was his attraction, he became very attracted to that sound vibration. Then he saw Harsha. And he became attracted to Harsha through that medium. And Harsha then stood and said, Dear sir, I've come here for the purpose of having a son with you. You're a Brahmana, and Brahmanas, when approached for charity, must give in that charity. And if you don't, then I'll have to give up my life because I don't want this benediction from anyone else, even from Lord Brahma. And if you deny, then I give up my life and you'll be guilty of Brahmahatya, so you have to comply. Vibhandaka wasn't interested. But because she had made this particular appeal, he discharged from his body some semen that landed on earth and said, here, you can somehow make some arrangement for a child. The earth started trembling because the semen of Vibhandaka was so powerful. She didn't know what to do. By mystic power, this is Valmiki Ramayana, there's other versions we'll say in a moment, she mystically transferred that semen of Vibhandaka to a deer, a female deer. Immediately the female deer became pregnant because it was of this higher order of beings. Within one day, a child was born. A human child with 2 horns. What's the deer going to do with this little child? So the deer went to the ashram of Vibhandaka and started crying. And Vibhandaka said, you're crying, what's wrong? And the deer started walking slowly, and the deer led Vibhandaka to where the child was. And he recognized that this must be my child. So he accepted the child, and the child became named Rishishringa. Rishishringa indicates that he had these horns on his head, a human with deer horns. So Vibhandaka was, this is now being narrated by Sumitra to Dasaratha of what he heard from Sanat Kumar describing something that happened long ago. He raised the child in such a manner that he would never see a female. Not only never see a female human, but he was so intense that even female species of insects and birds and animals weren't permitted in his territory. And he had a big ashram. So Rishishringa was trained by Vibhandaka with the same intensity of austerity and all the rituals and mantras and everything in proper culture, such that he would become a perfect brahmachari. And he was. So it so happened that the king, Romapada, who had now as an adopted daughter, Shanta, the daughter of Kaushalya and Ram, that when around the same time as the adopted daughter came to his kingdom, there was a drought. And it went on for a number of years. And people started talking, it's because of this girl, because of her presence. So he checked with his ministers, is that the reason? He said, no, the ministers, astrologers, whoever, said, it's because you offended the brahmanas. How did I offend the brahmanas? That there was some performance of yajna, and you had promised to give to the brahmanas charity, and to one of the brahmanas you promised a bag of diamonds. And when you were arranging to give this bag of diamonds to the brahmana, you saw there was one very special diamond, very valuable diamond. And you removed that valuable diamond from the bag and put a bigger diamond that was less valuable in the bag and gave the bag to the brahmana. But because the brahmana was so qualified, just by touching the bag, he can understand. You stole a diamond from this bag. You cheated a brahmana. You're a brahmana cheater. You're a liar. And we're not going to perform any more yajnas in your kingdom. We're going on a brahmana strike. And they left his kingdom. So, this is Dwapara Yuga, where the Yuga Dharma is performance of yajna. No brahmanas, no yajnas. No yajnas, no rain. No rain, no grain. It was a very serious condition. So the king consulted his ministers, now knowing what the problem was, how to deal with the problem. The cause and now the cure. And the cure was, if you bring a saintly person who is perfectly sinless and perfectly pure, as soon as that saintly person touches the kingdom soil, immediately rain will come. I said, who is that? And they said, Rishishringa. Who said, ministers, please make the arrangement for Rishishringa to come. They said, oh, we can't do that. Why not? Vibhandaka would destroy anybody that tries to take his son, because his son is not permitted to go anywhere. We'd be finished. And so would you. Well, what to do? We have a clever plan. What's that? Send some of the most attractive courtesans from your kingdom. Have them disguised as forest-dwelling rishis. set up a camp not far from Vibhandaka's place, and when Rishishringa treats them with great respect, they won't even know the difference between a man and a woman because he hasn't been trained at all, man, woman. And that they can lure him by their feminine charms back to the kingdom. As soon as he touches the kingdom soil, rain will come. So that's what the king did. Now the description is elaborate. It's a huge boat, massive, miles long and miles wide. Must have been a big river. To travel to the place near where the place of Vibhandaka's ashram, and they set up their own little camp, dressed as sages, forest-dwelling sages, but having different types of bodies than the normal forest-dwelling sages. And one day, when Rishishringa was out to gather items for the yajna and roots and wild edibles, he came across the place where the ladies were. And he was very happy to see them. My father has trained me to take care of all sages in the forest. Please come to my ashram and I'd like to honor you in the proper way. So he attempted to do like that, and they said, well, we have a different kind of culture. And there's details and details that I won't go into. But they said, we don't pay obeisances, we're not qualified like that. We embrace one another. And in different ways, they showed their culture to Rishishringa, who something happened that had never happened before. He became very attracted to these sages in a way that he had never been attracted to sages before. He couldn't understand it. And he went back to his ashram, and Vibhandaka had been gone for some time because he had received a report that one forest sage was in the mouth of an elephant and needed Vibhandaka's help to get him out of the mouth of the elephant. So he went, and when he was there, he got distracted with other requests and took a while to get back. When he got back, Rishishringa was obviously not the same anymore. His mind was not focused like it was focused before. So he asked, what happened? And Rishishringa told him, I met these wonderful sages in the forest. They looked a little different, described the differences, and said, I'm very attracted to them, with sighing heavily. And Vibhandaka condemned him, said, these are demons and don't have anything to do with them, and I'm going to go find them and finish them. Vibhandaka went looking for 3 days, couldn't find them, came back and said, don't have anything to do with these so-called sages anymore. But it was too late. Rishishringa had already gone down the path of woo, woo, woo. So one day he purposely went to find those lovely sages. And those lovely sages says, why don't you come to our hermitage? We have a boat, we'll take you there. It's a nice place. You'll really like it. A little different, but you'll really like it. So he was attracted and he went with them, and as soon as he reached the soil of the kingdom of Romapada, just by touching the land, as was said by his ministers, immediately rain came. Indra was very pleased. The rains came. He was forgiven. The offense to the Brahmanas had been overcome by a purified Brahmana coming to his kingdom in this way. And the Brahmanas then came back and started performing yajnas, and everything was nice. Except, there's always a problem, except the king knew that when Vibhandaka comes to see that his son is no longer in his ashram, he's going to get really angry. And when Vibhandaka gets very angry, watch out. So he made a plan. What was his plan? He suggested to Rishishringa that he marry his daughter, Shanta. So he agreed. So Shanta became the prince, because Romapada didn't have a son, but he had a daughter, and the prince married, and he became the next king. So when Vibhandaka came very angry to the king's, Romapada's kingdom, place by place he saw herds of cows, and the cowherds said, "We're the property of Rishishringa. We're the property of Rishishringa, and all these cows are the property of Rishishringa. We're in his service." Then he realized, uh-oh, he's now become the king. So if I do any harm to anyone else, then I'm harming the interests of my son, and it's irreligious, and so they defeated me. So he accepted that his son has now become married to the daughter of King Romapada. Again, this is Sanat Kumar narrating this in a previous yuga, before it even happened. And then Sumitra said, the best part of the story is this. Sanat Kumar said, in the future, this dear friend of King Romapada will be Dasaratha, and Dasaratha will be in the line of Ikshvaku, and Ikshvaku will not have sons, but Rishishringa will come to the kingdom of Romapada, the kingdom of Dasaratha, the Koshala kingdom, and Rishishringa will make a sacrifice whereby the king will have sons. So what you suggested to the ministers earlier today, after all this narration, now you understand it's right in keeping with what Sanat Kumar said. Go at once to your dear friend, King Romapada. Request that your daughter and her husband, Rishishringa, come here and perform the yajna. Dasaratha went. He spent a number of days and then disclosed the purpose of his visit. Please send your son-in-law with my daughter to my kingdom so he can perform this yajna so I can have a son. In fact, it was told he would have 4 sons. So Rishishringa came, and now it's already 9 o'clock. There's details and details and details. The Ashvamedha Yajna was performed, details and details and details. And following the Ashvamedha Yajna, that also has its details, Rishishringa said this Ashvamedha Yajna is to make you free from sin, and then Putra Kameshti Yajna was to perform to have a son. So we performed the Putra Kameshti Yajna. Vashishta was there to assist in making all the arrangements. While they were having the second yajna, the celestials, there are different versions, the celestials came to take their share of the offerings from the yajna, and they explained to Brahma, you've made a problem for us, demigods, that you've given these benedictions to Ravana, which you'll hear about later, benedictions, so we can't defeat him. And he's a terrorist. We can't defeat him, and he's terrorizing the whole universe. We're to protect the universe, and he's terrorizing the universe. And you did it, so you have to find a solution. Please. So the solution was Lord Vishnu. Because when I gave my benedictions, he was so proud that he explicitly and deliberately left out human beings. So within human society, Lord Vishnu should appear. Lord Vishnu pledged, I will soon appear. There's details. I will soon appear in this sacrifice and expand myself into 4 and appear as 4 sons of Dasaratha. And together we will defeat and destroy Ravana. I will do that. So be peaceful. So during the Putra Kameshti Yajna, a messenger from Vaikuntha appeared in very beautiful form with details and details, had a golden pot, entrusted the golden pot to Rishishringa, who then gave it to Dasaratha and said, divide it amongst your queens and they will have sons. And the division was made where Kaikeyi, the eldest queen, received half. Sumitra received half of the other half, and the other half of that half was given to Kaikeyi, and half of that half, and then the other half to Sumitra. So Sumitra had twins, Lakshman and Shatrughna were brothers. Bharat became the son of Kaikeyi, and Ram became the son of Kaushalya. So this is the first part of the narration of the glories of Ayodhya, given by Lava and Kusha, with lots of description that helps us understand the transcendental position of all these personalities that we're going to be hearing more and more about. It's all part of a divine, transcendental arrangement of attracting our hearts to the personality of Godhead, so that our attraction for the temporary can be lifted, and instead attraction for the personality of Godhead. While we live in the world and how to live in the world, the codes of Dharma are given by no better person than the personality of Godhead himself, showing how to live your life in this world according to the codes of Dharma and not swerve, even when there's difficulty. I only went a half an hour longer than I was scheduled for. But we'll try to keep our schedule better. I knew it was going to take longer. And I think the next session will also take a little more than normal, but I'll get better as we go along. At least it's planned that way. And if you have questions of things that you're hearing, write them down. We'll have time, hopefully, for questions and discussion later. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Ramachandra ki, Gaur Premanandi.